Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today? Let's do it. What unsolved mystery has a mundane explanation, but is ignored because it's not sensational enough? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Aaron Hedges was an elk hunter who did some weird shit and wandered off into the crazy mountains. His body was found the next year, as seen on Missing 411. The part that they skipped was him suddenly stopping a massive alcohol addiction. He was withdrawing like crazy. I think he might have been experimenting with anabuse or some anti-addiction medication to force him to stop drinking as well. Hunter trips balls and does some weird shit. Going through 10 out of 10 alcohol withdrawals doesn't seem so mysterious. The lost colony of Roanoke failed for reasons that are well documented and not mysterious. They sent their governor back to England for badly needed supplies. The colonists told Governor White that if they had forced to abandon the settlement, they would leave him a note saying where they'd gone, which would probably be with their Croatian allies. When White returned several years too late, he found the word Croatian carved into a tree. Modern sources refer to this carving as mysterious or cryptic, but contemporary sources say White was absolutely certain his people were alive and well with the Croatian, since there was no sign of conflict and they'd had time to dig up the hidden supply cache before leaving. Oh, the Croatan also started having light-skinned, blue-eyed children in the decades afterwards. But before White could confirm this, the ship's anchor snapped and they were forced to recall the landing party and return to England, leaving room for later writers to embellish and mythologize events that were not considered mysterious at the time. Diane Schuler isn't a big one, but I discovered the case when I came across some people discussing theories as to why it happened. She was the woman who ran her car full of kids into oncoming traffic, killing all involved except for her son. Afterwards, they tested her for substances and it came back positive for alcohol and marijuana. There was also a bottle of liquor in the passenger console. Reports say she stopped off at McDonald's a couple of hours earlier to get orange juice, which some believe was to mix the liquor in. Theories range from trying to explain why she drank to trying to explain why the toxicology report was obviously wrong. She couldn't have done that, because everyone around her said she wasn't a big drinker or smoker, though they later admitted she did smoke sometimes, and she was a very responsible, highly paid executive or something. Also, that she loved her kids and would never do that. Those who think she did drive under the influence tried to explain why by saying she had a bad tooth. As someone who had an alcoholic mother who casually drove drunk with us in the car all the time, other people didn't notice. She'd only ever been arrested for it once, when she got too sloppy at a baseball game, and Diane, by all accounts, was far less sloppy than my mom. She was able to keep it under wraps. She thought she could handle it. When her nieces called their parents during the drive crying and saying there was something wrong with Aunt Diane, she took the phone and said everything is fine. She didn't want to get caught, and she didn't want to admit she was drunk and driving the kids around. So even though she was stopping on the highway to puke and clearly unable to drive, she got back in the car and accidentally entered the highway going the wrong way. She didn't say that because she was having a medical emergency and was confused. She was very, very drunk and high. Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959. 9 Russian hikers found dead with bizarre injuries in the Ural Mountains, missing eyes and tongues, massive internal trauma, and no clear signs of struggle. UFOs, Yetis, and Soviet weapons were all theorized. In 2021, researchers concluded it was a delayed slab avalanche. Snow pressure and hypothermia caused panic and trauma, and animal scavenging explained the missing soft tissue. The Bermuda Triangle. If you take the same square mileage of ocean and measure it out elsewhere in the world, near similar ports and human settlements, you're going to have the same level of disappearances and weird occurrences. Archimedes' death ray. Mythbusters gave it at least 2 episodes, which was fun, but the Our Fake History podcast has made the solid take in my honest opinion. The first mention of this alleged device appears long after everyone who witnessed the Battle of Syracuse was dead, if memory serves, over 100 years after the battle, and the idea that it was a sun-focusing device comes even later. There's no credible indication that such a device was used at the battle. The real shame is that there is credible evidence that Archimedes deployed an amazing device at the Battle of Syracuse. Sailors who survived the battle described a giant claw that lifted boats up one end and dropped them to shatter and sink. The claw of Archimedes appeared to have been a real thing, possibly some sort of weaponized cargo crane with a grapple. The philosopher Plato entirely invented Atlantis to be the bad guys in his unfinished follow-up to his Republic edit, because I had to look it up. The follow-up is known as the Critias. The Republic describes Plato's ideal city-state. The sequel was intended to demonstrate how such a state should conduct itself in war against its antithesis, Atlantis. Athens had just finished a big old war with Persia, though. The problem is, it's easy to miss that Atlantis is supposed to be a very bad place, because Plato was the original old man yelling at clouds. Among things he hated were democracy, any interactions with foreigners, including trade, and imperialism, to be fair, and innovation of any kind. Also, he thought big building projects were disrespectful to the gods, and any kind of personal or architectural decoration was just plain sissified. The result is that his description of this gorgeous, cosmopolitan city with really over-the-top imaginary architecture and engineering just comes off as kind of kick-ass. The There's Your Problem podcast recently did a pretty good episode on the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, and how it really doesn't take much scholarship to realize that it's no more dangerous than any other major busy shipping line. And in fact, its mystery started during the early era of air travel, because that area of the East Coast is rife with military bases. A lot of training exercises happened in that area, and predictably, quite a few training exercises went missing, because they screwed up the training and crashed a plane. But then, sensationalist headline writers ran with it and decided to more or less retcon that the area had always been dangerous for shipping, which it hasn't. And half the mysterious disappearances and sinkings didn't even happen in the triangle, but who's going to let a few facts get in the way of a good popular ghost story? The idea that the triangle teleports people around, and even as sources to training flights where the crew got turned around and became convinced they were in the Gulf of Mexico and tried to fly north to land, they were over the Atlantic Ocean. They had just understeered when they made their maneuver back toward the shore because the lead pilot's compass was out, and rather than do a sensible thing like take a heading from one of the trainees that had a working compass, he decided to macho it up and try to eyeball the trajectory by the sun. They ended up flying north off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean and crashed when they ran out of fuel. Missing 411. If you take regular people and you put them in an irregular situation like wilderness, it's really likely for lots of people to get lost or injured. A lot of the people that get lost often get lost near water, which means they either drown or their body gets washed away, and that's why they're not found by the search parties. Also, never discount humans' ability to wander away, especially children. It's so easy to stumble off the path, get turned around, and then have no idea what direction the path is. An adult could walk 5 to 10 kilometers without needing to stop, especially if in a hurry trying to find their way back, and they feel like they're sure they're just going to stumble back on the path. Some of them are just really suspicious, like the sudden camping trip or hiking trip was to cover up something else that had happened. And then they can just say, "Oh, little Johnny was lost on the trail." A lot of the missing 411 were lost back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s before they had proper grid search training for volunteers. Back then, people would just be trampling over evidence without realizing it, and not searching in a methodical way, and the worst ones screaming out people's names without waiting to listen to see if they hear a response. I mean, I love a good mystery or conspiracy just like the next person, but the reality is that people can go missing in a national park, and a lot of people greatly underestimate how unforgiving nature truly is. It's important to carry any type of device that doesn't require electronics like a compass in case of emergency situations, or, basic survival skills like being able to identify where the sun is in the sky, which shouldn't be as difficult as you may think it is, to kind of gauge what time and what direction you're heading. These things could absolutely save your life. One of the most extreme moments of fear I ever experienced was when I was at a campground for a small festival in the middle of nowhere, sleeping alone in my van, easier and drier than a tent, away from the main area and cabins, across a dark empty field next to the woods. My head was towards the back door and my feet were just behind the passenger seat. I woke up in the night to see silhouettes of a creature about 4 feet tall, with an alien-shaped head, standing right next to the van and looking down at me through the side window. I couldn't see a face or any features, just the dark outline of the head and the narrow shoulders. It would have been scary enough to wake up to a person standing there in that field, looking at me while I slept. But I knew it was impossible for something shaped like this to be human. I actually think I blacked out for a moment. The terror was so extreme. When I came to, I lay there covered in cold sweat, afraid to move a muscle. Eventually it dawned on me that it wasn't moving either, so I mustered my courage and sat up and realized I was seeing this weirdly distorted reflection of the passenger seat headrest in the side window, which somehow looked like a dark shape just outside the van, not like a reflection at all. Some trick of the extremely dim light, I guess. The headrest was adjusted to be slightly above the seat, which is what contributed to the impression of a head and shoulders. When I lay back down and looked again, it still looked exactly like an alien silhouette. And even though I knew what it was, I had to remove the headrest altogether before I could go back to sleep. The USS Cyclops was a Navy collier coal carrier that disappeared in March of 1918. The loss is often described as the largest Navy ship to go missing, and no trace or wreckage of it has ever been found. Vanishing is often linked to the Bermuda Triangle, where it disappeared, as proof of something sinister or supernatural in that area of the Atlantic. While the exact fate of the ship remains unknown, a little bit of research reveals several clues that can easily explain what likely happened. The Cyclops was designed to carry coal, but it was carrying manganese ore when it was lost. Manganese is heavier and denser than coal, so the holds wouldn't have been completely filled, allowing room for the load to shift and unbalance the ship. There was also some concerns that the Cyclops was overloaded. Another issue with manganese ore is that it tended to react with the steel beams of ore carriers, corroding them and weakening the hull. Evidence of this was seen on the one carrier, USS Jason, and the other, Chucky, was so damaged from this that it broke in two while in calm water. Weather reports indicated that the Cyclops may have run into a storm with 30 to 40 knot winds. In storms that produce large waves, a ship's hull can buckle or even break if the two ends are caught on the crests of waves. In addition, 3 of the 4 Proteus-class warships disappeared at sea, Cyclops and 2 sisters. The 4th was sunk by Japanese aircraft during World War II. This clearly indicates flaws or problems with the ships. Putting it all together, it's not hard to figure out what probably happened. The ship had a flawed design and weakened hull, and was carrying a heavy and unstable load. It ran into a storm and likely either capsized or broke apart and sank. How the pyramids of Egypt were built, especially the Great Pyramid. The mystery comes from an assumption made by a few late 19th century archaeologists about how a structure like that could be built out of huge stone blocks. Truly, it's very difficult to design even a hypothetical process by which enough blocks could have been cut, moved, and placed, given what we know for certain about the population of Egypt and the amount of time the pyramids were built in. Later, a further layer added to the mystery. By the mid-20th century, having found and excavated all of the stone quarries, which matched stone used in the pyramids, it looked like there had never been enough stone cut, not by an order of magnitude, to make that many blocks to begin with. But there's no mystery. The actual explanation was proposed as soon as the first academic discussion of the matter started, and it had always been the accepted explanation by everyone except sensationalists. It was made the same way thousands of impressive ancient structures were built, including many other structures from the same period of ancient Egypt. The Great Pyramid is not made of neatly stacked blocks of stone. It's a pile of rubble and dirt, carefully and masterfully engineered to the purpose, covered by a thin veneer layer of enormous, impressive stone blocks. The only reason the mystery explanation gets any traction at all is because of the Egyptian government, fearing that it might hurt tourism. The government reviews every archaeological project and forbids any action that would reveal part of the structure of the pyramids that has not already been observed. No drilling, no digging outside of the original pathways and tunnels left by the builders, not even non-invasive means like ground-penetrating radar or sonar. We know how the pyramids were built, but it is illegal to collect any new evidence to prove it. A lot of the cases David Paulides claims fit his list of disappearances are simply regular disappearances due to getting lost in the woods. As my dad put it after watching a video on his claim, of course you have clusters of missing people in huge national parks. You can't get that lost in downtown Omaha. The point is that the clusters reflect exactly where someone could go missing and not be found. The only clusters that would be weird would be if they were inside of an urban area. Paulides' storytelling makes a lot of the stories sound more interesting than they are. He gives a lot of hobbyist hikers too much credit as experts. He gives too much credit to parents who claim they only turned their back for a second. We know people lie about this 100% of the time. When there is security cam footage to review, toddler ends up dead in the pool, and the parents claim he was only out of sight for a second. Pull the CCTV, and the kid was alone for 10 minutes. The vast majority of the cases are hypothermia, and the ones they haven't found aren't that unusual. In a giant uninhabited place, you can get lost and never found. Bloodhounds or dogs only work about 25% of the time. My bestest buddy in the whole world runs 3 teams of them, and he admits that dogs have failed to find a dead deer in an open field many times. Kids' bodies would be extremely hard to find once nature takes its course. Adults out of their mind tend to fall off cliffs to hard-to-reach places. I could go on, but the vast majority of these mysterious cases are people with hyperthermia, hypothermia. Some of the other cases are parents lying about the exact detail of their kid's disappearance in order to protect themselves. I think the mystery of what happened to the Roanoke colony is stupid. It's possible that I've misunderstood something about it, since every time I see people talking about it, they consider it a mystery. The story is that John White was the governor of Roanoke in what is now North Carolina, and he took a voyage back to England for supplies. When he returned to Roanoke, all the people were gone, and the word Croatoan was carved into a tree. There was a nearby island called Croatoan Island, populated by the Croatoan tribe, and in the years following, there were numerous reports of Native Americans with European traits. John White never actually visited Croatoan Island. To me, it seems abundantly obvious that the members of the lost colony of Roanoke had some issues in the 3 years he was gone that forced them to move in with the Croatoans. The only mysterious part of the story is what issue may have led to that. But every time I see someone talking about this story, they question where the people went.